Parkinson's affects 1 million people in the United States and more than 6 million people worldwide, according to Parkinson's 101 from www.michaeljfox.org. My grandmother, who I lovingly call my Nana, is one of them. Now, Parkinson's disease is a progressive disease that is manageable. We will learn together what Parkinson's disease is, how is it incurable, with the efforts to change this, and how it is manageable. As I have received weird looks time and time again when I mention this disease, I believe I should first tell everyone what exactly this disease is. Now, the Oxford dictionaries will define exactly Parkinson's disease as a progressive disease of the neurons system marked by tremors, muscular rigidity, and slow, imprecise movement, chiefly affecting middle-aged and elderly people. It is associated with degeneration of the basal ganglia of the brain and the deficiency of neurotransmitters, dopamine. The neurotransmitter called dopamine has an array of duties. It helps with more than just mood. It helps with movement, alertness, addiction, and even pleasure. According to Parkinson'sViewpoint.com, if your brain produces a normal level of dopamine, your body will be charged enough to perform all sorts of movements, whether it's running, walking, getting in and out of a chair, rolling over in bed, or putting your shoes on and off properly. Now, the site also explains why Parkinson's is known as a progressive disease. It explains that the dopamine neurotransmitters do not die instantaneously. They actually die progressively, giving the disease part of its name. Progressive, of course, meaning gradually, advancing in extent, increasing, as it is defined by Grammarly. Now, when the disease begins, these specific dopamine neurons actually start to die. The brain will start in its production process for dopamine. This lasts for quite a few years. The early stage in the disease, they slowly begin to die. It's hard for patients with the disease to be diagnosed in this early stage, as I have displayed up here. The reason why it is hard to diagnose the disease, it doesn't affect movement quite yet, though the other areas the dopamine affects will start being noticeable. Those areas include mood and pleasure, for example. Even the loss of smell can start to be evident and the inability to sleep. Eventually, the brain reaches what is called the advanced stage, displayed at the bottom. At the advanced stage, the dopaminergic neurons in the brain are absent altogether. The person with the disease will need assistance in their mobility, as they will have lost their ability to move completely on their own. The absence of the neuron may also cause depression, behavioral issues, and memory problems. It is important to note through Parkinson's disease that though it is incurable, there are efforts to change this. There is new hope as research is being done towards a cure. An article was published back in 2017 of promising news on dailymail.com. The author, Alexander Thompson, states in an article, a selection of small molecules can make brain cells produce the chemical messenger, dopamine, which is lost in Parkinson's sufferers, causing tremors. Now, these small molecules can reprogram cells in the brain. Once it is reprogrammed, it will help produce dopamine. They have been testing this find on mice. Now, the mice they're grabbing, they're not just any mice. The mice they're grabbing actually display the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. They make this cocktail or mixture of these molecules and they inject it into these mice, and later on they actually see improvement from the symptoms in these mice. Now, the article on the Daily Mail website can also be quoted in saying, the treatment may overtake cell transplants, which were previously thought to be the only hope of a cure and require immune system suppressing drugs. And finally, since we've discussed what Parkinson's disease is, and about a new hope in finding a cure, there's still one more thing to talk about. What do the present Parkinson's patients have to help manage the manage the disease in their daily lives now? there's a lot of different things. Now, there's medicine, there's surgeries, there's therapies, and changes in diets. The medicinal route, that's the first route they normally take. The most common prescriptions include carbidopa, Sinemet, and levodopa. The prescription helps with stiffness, rigidity, and movement. And it has a mixture of 2 amino acids in them. Now, levodopa is in the CNS, and if you've ever had an anatomy class or you're familiar, CNS is the central nervous system. And carbidopa acts as an enzyme known as a carboxylases. Now, the enzyme defined by Grammarly is it catalyzes the carboxylases of a carboxyl group, effectively removing carbon dioxide from a compound. And obviously, I also mentioned surgery. It's another option. Now, the most common form is DBS, so deep brain stimulation. My grandmother, my Nana, she had one of those. And it's actually a similar concept, one that we're all familiar. It's similar to a pacemaker. It runs an electrode into different parts of the brain to help stimulate its movement. And everydayhealth.com puts it in good words. It continues on to explain the surgery by stating, a pulse generator with a battery pack is implanted in the chest near the collarbone. A wire from the generator ends up finely controlled, painless electrical signals are sent to the brain to interfere with signals that cause the motor symptoms of Parkinson's. Now, obviously there's the diet. I mentioned that as well. There's different diet options. One of the biggest things, as constipation is a symptom, and I have it listed along here with the other symptoms. Fiber, it's a big deal. They need more fiber in their diet. I also mentioned the levodopa prescription. Protein soaks up that prescription drug in their system. So, less protein is better in that Parkinson's patient's diet for that drug to work better for them. Nothing else is certain in their diet. They've tried with other things like caffeine and the lack thereof, with other supplements and many other things, but it's uncertain. Now, everydayhealth.com also mentions that regular aerobic exercise and strength training can help to improve strength, flexibility, and balance, as well as fight depression in people with Parkinson's disease. And we've seen this research in many other areas with depression and things like that. We know it works. So Parkinson's is no wonder. My Nana also does this. As we conclude, I'd like to quote Michael J. Fox, as he said in an interview and from his book, to look at the choices you have, opposed to the choices that have been taken away from you. Because in those choices, there are whole worlds of strength and new ways to look at things. And people with Parkinson's still have choices like everyone else. The efforts from foundations like Michael J. Fox and others that I have listed over here to the far are also working towards expanding those choices even more. As for right now, though, the management of symptoms through the surgeries and medications and therapies and everything else are what they have right now through life moving forward. Thank you. This is
Blow up.